Hello everybody and welcome to my Q&A video. So about 4 or 5 days ago I posted a video saying that I'll be doing a Q&A, and so far I've received about 21 questions, so I'll just be going ahead and answering them. I'm planning to do this video in 2 parts though, each part probably being in the ballpark of 15 minutes. So to get started, the first question is, what is your favorite GPU that you have ever owned? And I've owned a number of GPUs. I've only bought 3 or 4 different kinds maybe, but I've owned a lot. I've owned 8600, old NVIDIA cards and stuff. I've bought brand new NVIDIA cards. I've owned ATI cards back before AMD owned them. But I think my favorite video card would probably be the GTX 780s I have in my PC right now. Those are 2 3 GB graphics cards in SLI, and I would say the reason I like them the most is because they actually have good cooling. Because a lot of video cards, you got this giant video card, right? You have a little turbine fan trying to eject all the air out the back, and those usually don't do a great job. But the ACX coolers, they call them, on these things do a great job of just keeping the card cool enough so that it doesn't overheat. I had a GTX 680 a few years back that it would basically just overheat nonstop, at least when it was an SLI, and that wasn't too great. So yeah, favorite video cards would be 780s. So the next question is, how is your 2012 gaming PC holding up? Would you say it's time to upgrade? As a lot of you know, I'm using it right now, and it's doing just fine. I've upgraded a lot since I first had it. If I hadn't upgraded it, it would have been really interesting because I would have had a little 64 gig SSD full to the brim and stuff, and two 560 graphics cards. But yeah, since then I've upgraded a little bit, and I think it's perfectly fine for now. I mean, the CPU is plenty fine for what it is. It's an i7 from 2012, but I almost never see it go above 30-40% when I'm using it. So that doesn't need an upgrade. The only thing I think I'd upgrade in the next few years in this PC is probably the size of the SSD, and maybe get more memory if I need to do a lot of VM stuff for schoolwork, and maybe the video cards. But as of right now, probably for the next at least 6 months or a year, I don't have any need to put more of anything into this PC, so I'd say it's holding up quite nicely. So what got me into my current field of work? That's a good question. It wasn't really like an overnight thing, I wake up one morning and I decide that, I want to do this. There were a lot of forks in the road where I had to kind of go one direction or the other. And I would say the first thing was that about 7 years ago when I wanted a gaming PC, I wanted to buy one. I just wanted to go to the store and buy one and put up like a graphics card or something in it, and use that for playing my video games. And I didn't know much about computers. I used to use a Dell E520 my dad bought in 2007 for playing games with my brother, but he started working for himself and he needed that PC, which is why I wanted to get a PC. But he told me that I was going to build a PC because it's more educational than buying one. So I went ahead and my brother and I started going on Newegg, learning about computers and piecing stuff together, and basically learning about what makes parts compatible with each other. And we pieced together a gaming PC wish list, and we bought it in mid 2009 as I was turning 13 or so. And it didn't work for 10 months, but because the motherboard was bad, but we replaced that a while later. And I really liked doing that. And around the same time, my dad started taking us to the recycling center in town, and they would have an electronics bin, and I realized people were throwing out stuff that was worth $100 or $200 sometimes even. I mean, a lot of it wasn't, of course, but some of it was worth good money. So my brother and I would bring it back, and we'd wet the drives and refurbish them and get them ready to sell. It took us a little while to figure out eBay. For some reason, it was confusing to me. I don't know why, especially with all the packaging and stuff. But we honed down all that work, and we started selling on eBay. And I just worked with probably 100 or 200 desktops, and I got a lot of hardware knowledge. And when it came time to start going to college, I was thinking about either doing cybersecurity. Well, actually, I wasn't really thinking about cybersecurity yet. I was thinking more of game design, actually, because I do a little bit of game design. And I was also thinking about maybe something technical. But at that point in time, I was really a hardware guy, strictly hardware. I didn't know a single scripting language or a single programming language. I barely knew anything about software. I just wanted to get my hands on hardware all day. But I was kind of coming across the slow realization, very uncomfortable realization, that you can't really run a hardware business for much longer, especially because at that point in time, I was 18, I was 47 years away from retirement. There's no way you can run a computer repair business for 47 or 45 years. And I eventually kind of shied away from game design, which I'm honestly thankful for, because I think it might have been my dad pointed out there was a cybersecurity program at my school, and at first I was like, I don't really want to do software stuff, I want to do hardware, but I realized this is probably the way to go. So I got to school and I started doing this stuff, and I realized this is fun stuff because there's more to it than just cybersecurity. It's also computer networking too. So it's very hands-on, pretty technical, and I enjoy it thoroughly, and that's where I'm planning to go with my career. So that's my answer to your question. So the next question is Athlon XP or Pentium 4? I've worked with a lot of old CPUs around the Athlon XP Pentium 4 era, the first half of the 2000s, or maybe up to 2010 even. And I've worked with a lot more Intels than AMDs, but I never really got used to the AMD Athlon series CPUs, because they were the kind of CPUs where you look at it, it's like Athlon 64 3200 plus, and you would expect the 3200 plus to mean that's 3200 megahertz or 3.2 gigahertz, and you'd pop it in a machine and realize that's 1.8 or 2 gigahertz. Just little things like that kind of just made me not really love the AMD CPUs. So why would you name it that if it has nothing to do with anything about the CPU? And gigahertz to gigahertz, core count to core count, I think Intel CPUs have always been a little bit more powerful. And I just always kind of like Pentium 4s, a little bit more straightforward to work with. And especially because a lot of them would support hyper-threading and nice little things like that. So I would have to go with Pentium 4s on that one. Next question is, what was my first ever gaming PC build? Specs. I mentioned this a couple questions ago. Back in mid-09, when I was turning 13, my brother and I should say, built a computer with an E8500 Core 2 Duo. That was a 3.16 gigahertz dual core. No hyper-threading or anything on it, just straight up dual core. I thought the thing was boss when I got it. I had the choice between a Core 2 Duo and a Core 2 Quad. I went with the Core 2 Duo because it ran the games I wanted to play better. And yeah, I thought the thing was amazing. I had 4 gigs of DDR3 memory. I had a 320 gig hard drive originally, and an NVIDIA GeForce 9800 GTX Plus. It's a 512 meg graphics card. Oh man, I thought that stuff was amazing, and it was, of course. 7 years ago, it wasn't bad, but. It's just funny to look back and see how much things have changed. I look at 9800, and you realize it has S video on the back. It's what is this? But anyway, yeah. Those were the general specs, and it lasted me very nicely for a few years. I got a Windows XP 64-bit for it, and used that for a few years until I upgraded to Windows 7 on it, and eventually just built this PC a couple years or 3 years after I built that one. So yeah, that's that. It lasted me well, and it was a good little PC. So next question is, what do I prefer, Android or iOS? I've had an iPhone ever since I got a phone, about almost 5 years ago. Don't hate me too much, please. I've never really used Android that much. I've just kind of tapped around other people's Android phones, but I would have to say I like iOS because it's a phone and it's easy to use. I think Android's better for developing, but I'm not a phone developer. I just want to use my phone for phone purposes, texting and Facebook and things like that. So I would have to go with iOS on that one. Next question is 4 questions. Has your internet speed changed since you've moved out, and if so, what is it? I remember back 6 or 7 years ago at my parents' house, we had 40 kilobyte per second internet, and trying to play games on that while your brothers were watching YouTube was basically the worst thing ever. They bumped them up to 150 kilobytes a second, and a couple years ago, I think 300 kilobytes per second, which is 2.4 megabits a second, if you want to use megabits. But after moving out into my freshman dorm, they had gigabit Ethernet on campus, but everyone's throttled back to a certain amount. But at my own apartment here, I have 200 megabits, which is 25 megabytes a second, and I get a pretty solid 25 megabytes download, and I love it. So it's pretty great. So yes, it has changed by a factor of a lot. Number 2, do you plan to move the Dell server from campus to your apartment? That's a good question. I would say yes. because I'd like to cut out my stupid Raspberry Pi VPN thing. I mean, I'm kind of proud that the VPN works. Like the Raspberry Pi part of the VPN works amazingly, but the server is always disconnecting because the campus network might I don't know, give a new DHCP address or something for whatever reason, or somebody might unplug it, or it might restart automatically and then not reboot properly or something. It's really a pain, and it's difficult for me to get to. So I would like to run it from here, but the problem is that it chugs power. I ran the numbers, and it would probably cost me within the ballpark of $25 or $30 a month just for power. And I've been running for 2 years, so if it cost me $25 a month for 24 months, that's what, $600, I think, and that's a lot of money. So I'd have to say no on that one. But would I ever consider upgrading the Dell to something a bit more modern? Yes, I think I would. But I mean, that Dell, it's old, it's 10 years old, but it's got 2 quad-core CPUs and 16 gigs of memory, and takes SAS and SATA hard drives. So in order to buy something modern or build something modern that's as powerful as that, I'd probably have to spend at least $300 on parts, like $100 CPU, cheap motherboard and stuff like that. And is that really worth it to me? I don't know. Probably not, honestly. But what I'm thinking about doing is taking an old Dell Optiplex, like 760 that I haven't sold yet, the Core 2 Duo, same model as my old gaming PC, the E8500, and just putting that in here and running some servers off that, because it's a little small form factor PC. It takes up like 30 or 40 watts of power, maybe 40 watts of power idling, so it only costs me a few bucks a month to run. So not super powerful. I wouldn't be doing a Rust server from that or anything. I would just be doing Gmod stuff. So I think that would be probably the most likely thing for me to do. And lastly, what is my opinion on the new Intel Skylake CPUs? And would I consider upgrading to a 6700K or something similar? When I first read this question, because I was just going over these, I looked up the Skylake, and I'm not super familiar with it. Obviously, the transistor size is smaller, so they fit more of them in the same chip, and they produce less heat and things like that. But I'm not aware of anything absolutely groundbreaking Intel has put into it. I think it's it's just a new series of CPU. It's not like it's a quantum CPU or anything. So I'm sure it's a good CPU. Intel makes good stuff. I'm sure it's an improvement over the previous generation, but it's really all I have to say about it. And would I consider upgrading to a 6700K? Probably not, because like I said earlier, my PC doesn't need it, and in order to do a 6700K, I'd almost certainly need to upgrade my motherboard and basically build an entirely new PC in the first place. So I'm probably not going to upgrade this PC for a few years anyway, so I would say I'm going to hold off on anything like that for at least a few more years. Do I plan on doing more videos with modern-ish, like the last 7 years or so, Rackmount servers? Initially, my answer would be, unfortunately, no way, because the issue with making videos and that stuff is that you need Rackmount servers to make videos on. And I have a couple servers like back home at my parents' house that I can make videos on. They're old though, but I don't have any modern Rackmount servers in my own possession. So my initial answer would be no, because I'm not going to spend $5,000 buying them to make videos on, because I wouldn't even use them in the first place. But actually, just last week at work, I was informed that I would be allowed to make videos off the clock, of course, after work hours, or even during work hours, as long as I'm off the clock, I guess, on some of the non-production hardware they have there, which I'm pretty excited for. I would have to run it by the guys there to make sure they know I'm not spilling any important information, which I wouldn't do, but so I should be making some videos sometime soon on like a Precision R710 server and a Dell 3220i storage area network that's worth like probably $8,000 or $10,000. I think it's got 13 1 terabyte SAS drives and like a dual rate controller and everything. It's a beast. So I'll be making some videos on that stuff, hopefully in the near future. Do I like Apple products? I feel like a lot of you are going to hate me for this, but just as a disclaimer, I do admit they're extremely expensive, and I do admit, especially in relation to the price, the hardware is like not up to snuff. I fully admit the fact that if you are buying a PC for X dollars, you will get way better hardware than you do with a Mac. But you have to keep in mind, when somebody's buying a Mac, they're not just buying hardware inside a case. They're buying, a lot of it's the software, and a lot of it's the integration of software into that specific hardware because of Apple's closed environment. So overall, I do like them. I wouldn't buy one for myself because they're so damn expensive. But if somebody were to give me an Apple product, or if somebody were to come up to me and say, I will give you either a Lenovo that's $1,500 or a $1,500 MacBook, and you're not allowed to resell them, you have to use them, you can only choose one, I would choose the Apple one probably. Depending on what I need it for. If I need it for gaming, then I would go with the Lenovo, but I don't need anything for gaming, so I would probably go with the Apple, because I find that, sure, they're not as technical as Windows, you can't upgrade them as much, you can't do quite as much developmental, technological work, but I got a desktop, so I like to have the best of both worlds. I like PCs, and I like to use Macs every now and then, because the software, like Mac OS 10, to me is just a breeze to use. It doesn't break as much as Windows. You never really hear about a BSOD on Mac OS, right? You don't have driver issues, you don't have as many, hardware, software issues. So I kind of like Apple products a little bit, besides the fact that they cost a lot and hardware is not amazing for what you're paying. Advice for upcoming freshmen, such as making friends, studying, social life balance, etc. Upcoming freshmen. This is an interesting question. There's really no solid black and white answer for me to give you on this one. But as far as making friends goes, I would say you can't be everybody's friend. You're going to be, chances are, put into a dorm environment, assuming you're talking about college, of course, where you don't know anyone there. Maybe you might know somebody from your hometown, but chances are you're not going to know anyone there. And everyone's going to try to hang out with each other at first because no one's going to know each other and they're going to try to be making friends. But you're going to slowly realize a lot of those people that you might initially be with aren't just a compatible personality type with you, and you're going to not be friends with them in the future. So don't try to impress everyone, don't try to be everyone's friend. Find people that are would genuinely make good friends with you, and make friends with them. Try to get involved in activities and things outside of your dorm to maybe just meet people and have fun, because a lot of friends you make in college are very good friends that last a long time. Studying social life balance, I would say that my favorite way to approach this is work hard, play hard. A lot of college students have a lot of work to do, so as long as you're honest with yourself about how much work you have, and as long as you kind of scout out and say, okay, I probably have, this assignment will probably take a few hours, this assignment will probably only take 20 minutes. Just make sure you're being honest with yourself about how much work you do, and get it out of the way, and that way, when you have spare time, you can do whatever you want, versus always being, procrastinating and worrying about, oh my gosh, this is due in 20 minutes or whatever. I would say that's about it. At my school and a lot of schools, you can see the freshmen. You know who's a freshman when you see them. At my school, they'll walk around with lanyards with their names on them like it's a gaming convention. And there's just no reason to do that. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that, but just something to keep in mind if you don't want to be like one of those obvious freshman types. So, do I not recycle and repair computers any longer? It's not that I don't do that specifically, it's just that I don't really have the opportunity to so much. I don't have any recycling centers to go to and pull stuff out of anymore. I don't have a lot of people around me giving me PCs that they don't want. I don't have a lot of people around me needing their computers repaired, so it's not that I specifically don't do that anymore, it's just that I don't have a whole lot of opportunity for that anymore, so I don't do it that much.